When crap hits the fan, you'll need a place to go. And it doesn't matter if you're actually bugging out during the crap hits the fan scenario or if you're planning to buy some place ahead of time, there are certain things you need to look for. But make sure you stay to the end of the video because there's lots of stuff here, lots of information you need to look at. All right, the first thing I want to talk about are biomes. And there's all kinds of biomes of places that you can try to live. And although there's people living in every single one of these biomes, you and me, we probably wouldn't fit in so well. But let's go ahead and take a look at them. Like forest. Great for hunting and providing lots of wood for fires. And of course, if you want to grow food, you'll have to clear land out. The prairie is great for growing food and for grazing livestock. But what will you do when you need to burn stuff to keep warm during the winter? The desert, you'll have lots of isolation. But what will you drink? Can you survive in the desert? Even others love mountains, but not very hospitable to life. Hard to grow things, but great hunting. You also need to take a look at latitude. Up north, you may be more isolated from people, but you also have a shorter growing season and you have to have lots of wood to keep warm in your house. Down south may be better for you, but in that situation, you may actually get overheated from the labor you actually have to do in the hot summer sun. Here's some other things you want to look at as well. Acreage. I wouldn't do anything less than 10 acres. That's just my opinion. In fact, 20 would be better. And even if you're actually living down south, you'll still want to have some forest for wood for the fact you want to be able to build fires and cook things. Now, think about also you want to have some open land so you can actually have crops, some plants, some gardening, not to mention places for animals to graze. Here for us in Michigan, we actually have just over 10 acres and about 8 acres of it are forest, which keeps our house warm that we burn the wood from the land. Then the other 2 acres are cleared in which we garden. Wood to burn. If everything's business as usual, then you have no problem with like a pellet stove or propane or even natural gas to heat your house and cook food. But in crap hits the fan, guaranteed all that's going to be gone. So having some wood on your property is essential. Even if you're living down south, there will be those times where you're going to want to be able to keep your house warm and heated. Again, not to mention to cook too. What are you going to cook with if you have no wood at all? So wood is essential. Make sure that if you actually have some property, you have access to at least some wood to be able to get by. Must have water. And I'll say it again, you must have water. This could almost be listed as the first thing to look for, but obviously you have to have acres first. Water is essential. 3 days without water, you die. You have to have water for yourself, not to mention all your plants and your livestock too. Water is something in some states it's absolutely scarce. Places like Michigan, we have tons of it. Before we came here though, we almost bought a place in Colorado. They had 4 wells dug and all 4 wells were dry as a bone. So make sure that no matter what you do, wherever you go, no matter what situation, you're going to have access to water. It is vital. Must have food. We already mentioned you actually have to have places cleared off for animals to graze and or growing food for you as far as your garden goes. But you also have to look at, as we mentioned before also, a length of the growing season. All that comes into play. But more so, what's your soil like? Is it going to be soil? Is it going to be clay? Is it sandy? All those things come into play. How about hunting and fishing? Is that something you can do on the property you're looking at? Is that something you're proficient at? Population centers. When we moved to Michigan, we made sure population centers was one of our first things we wanted to stay away from. Now there's a small city about 35 minutes from here, and that's where we go for our shopping on occasion. But we think it's small enough and far enough away it's not going to pose any problems. Major cities, however, you got to get as far away from those as possible. Understand that people in the city, all they need is a tank of gas to get where you're at. They get their food every single day. Understand that in the city, they don't grow anything there. So if their food gets shut down, there's a collapse and their supply chain stops, they're not going to stay in that city. A big chunk of them won't anyway. They're going to flee and come to where you're at to hopefully get some food. They're going to be starving and become desperate. You need to understand this. So I've heard people say, well, that's okay, come on out because I got a gun. We're not talking about 1 or 2 or 3 people. We're talking about hundreds, if not thousands of people, millions of people heading out to the country from these cities trying to find food. And your place, the place you've worked so hard for, has food, that's where they're coming. So you're going to have a lot more than a gun. You're going to need a community at least, and you want to stay away from the cities as much as possible so it decreases your chances. Major roads. So that actually is how they're going to get your place. Studies show that when the people do flee the cities or they're actually going to be migrating, they stay on the major roads, which is interesting to me. So having your house on a major road, even if you're a couple hours away from the city, is still potentially dangerous. You're going to want to try to get way off the major road as much as possible, and actually even have concealment so the people from the city won't be able to find your place. So be out in the middle of nowhere if possible. Your job. This is where it gets difficult. I've had so many people contact us and say, listen, should I quit my job and sell my house and move out of the country? No way. The last thing you want to do is be homeless when crap hits the fan. But try to find a way to get some property. You can be very creative about this. Understand it isn't always simply just go out and buy it. But there's techniques you can do. Like, for example, I know one person who bought some property, got a loan for it, had it timbered, and all the money from the timber paid for the property. And granted, I know you don't want to do that, but at least you have some property. But nobody says you actually have to move there either. You know, even if it's like 2 or 3 hours away, see if you can find some property, even without a cabin, and you start going there on weekends and working on it. It's very important. Now, obviously, if you can go on the internet and work from home and make that your new place, all the better. But I know work comes into play. And eventually, I know a lot of people want to make it so they live out on their property and they sell stuff from their property. That's even better. But we're talking about a major transition for that. But again, I just stress, be creative. Try to think of an original way of making it happen. Where there's a will, there's a way, and you can make it happen. Natural disasters. Although this is not a major consideration, it is a consideration. The place you're going to, does it have tornadoes, hurricanes, massive amounts of snow? We have, I wouldn't say massive amounts of snow here, but we get snow. Our first year here, years ago, was one of the worst snowstorms they've actually had in a long time. We actually got snowbound in our house for 2 weeks straight and couldn't leave. It was kind of fun in a lot of ways, but also it was getting to the point where it's like, I got to get out of here. So we dug out and finally went to the store and got some fresh milk and such, came back and got snowed in again for 10 more days. All those things come into play. You need to take those into consideration because it actually could be life-threatening if you don't know what's coming to your area. Don't be a target. If you find a place where you can get land dirt cheap, you might want to be a little cautious about that. Oh, it happens to be right next to a missile silo. Don't worry, the missiles almost never go off. Or a nuclear power plant downwind from that, or a military base, or a prison, or a toxic waste dump. The list goes on and on. Make sure you do your research because you don't want to bug out to your land that you're so happy to go to finally have it so, well, guess what, you die. Collateral damage from like a nuclear attack or whatever the case may be. But here's something to think about. If we're talking about a complete, total collapse of society, there's probably not going to be forest rangers either. Think about that. All these forest areas in the United States, which right now, good luck trying to chop wood at for free or live at, you're not gonna be able to, then you might be able to. Just do some scouting ahead of time and see what's going on. And again, trying to bug out to these locations, even if you find a place of land that's yours, go up there on weekends and work on it. There's all kinds of ways you can possibly make this happen. But again, you have to be careful as far as your land goes. Trying to get out there ahead of time before anything happens is your best bet. But there's things you can do too if crap does hit the fan. Now, bugging out may not be your best option. Let's go ahead and check out this next video and understand why you may not want to bug out.